All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, as she often does, Ilhan Omar's mere existence is making heads explode. Latest controversy was sparked when she said the following.
As long as our economy and political systems prioritize profit without considering who is profiting, who is being shut out, we will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it.
So for some reason, this caused RNC research teams, Republican politicians, and reactionary outlets like the Daily Caller to utterly melt down. Marsha Blackburn tweeted, Ilhan Omar took an oath to defend and protect the Constitution, not shred it. Omar and her Marxist comrades are a threat to our democracy. She should resign. What brave patriots will stand with Marsha Blackburn in defense of our systems of oppression? It's all foolish, of course, but I wanted to actually use this opening of right-wing mania to dig into Congresswoman Omar's comments because, of course, she is 1,000% correct in her assessment. And as we've watched the COVID pandemic and millions lose their jobs and their health care and the stock market soar, as we've watched anguished protesters take to the streets and peered over the precipice of utter societal breakdown, if you aren't thinking that a total dismantling is not only the right course, but the most realistic and practical choice to get out of this, I don't know where you've been, but I can probably guess your class status. Even the New York Times, who gave frickin' Amy Klobuchar a half-endorsement, has come around to essentially adopting Bernie Sanders' agenda. Of course, they won't name him or give him any credit, but the worldview is unmistakable. In a recent editorial, they wrote, American workers need a raise, but it is not enough to transfer wealth from the rich to the desperate. In confronting the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt understood that a sustainable improvement in the quality of most American lives required an overhaul of the institutions of government. Quote, these economic royalists complain that we seek to overthrow the institutions of America, Roosevelt said in 1936. What they really complain of is that we seek to take away their power. Now, if the neoliberals at the New York Times have embraced the program of FDR and Sanders, it's time for us to ask whether what is required is actually much more than what we were originally demanding. After all, the entire nation has stood witness as the supposed bedrock principles of our economy have been revealed as an utter sham. How many times have we heard about the debt and the deficit? How much was modern monetary theory, which provides a new model for understanding the reality of deficits when you are a sovereign with a money printer? How much was that theory derided and treated like economic quackery? How many times have political leaders and candidates looking to do something decent for the poor, the working class, or the middle been shouted down with, but how will you pay for it? After all, if we don't balance our budget the way a household balances their checkbook, then we'll have hyperinflation and economic catastrophe. And my God, look at Venezuela. What a load of crap. Trillions of dollars have been passed down, thrown at the market like it was nothing. Do you see inflation, let alone hyperinflation? No, you do not. In fact, there's been more of a realistic concern around deflation as cash-strapped Americans pull back on purchases. Now, we've covered at length here, of course, the grotesque disconnect between the stock market and actual reality for most Americans. It's obvious now, but as Jon Stewart put it recently to Joe Rogan, the market has been used as a pulse oximeter of the entire economy, as if it said something deeply meaningful about the well-being of anyone outside a privileged few. Trump is still out there tweeting about how great he's been for the market, clinging like a barnacle to this pathetic and absurd metric. But that's not all. We've been told that these genius investors and high-flying entrepreneurs and corporate executives were some kind of demigods with their brave risk-taking and brilliant prognostication out there in the wilds of the market. They aren't the ones taking risk. They're sitting in their mansions in the Hamptons, quarantining with their household help while the American people backstop all their supposedly risky bets. Chamath Palihapitiya put this part quite well back on CNBC a while ago.
But are you suggesting, you keep saying propping up zombie companies. Are you arguing to let airlines, for example, fail?
Yes.
Why? I mean, how does that make sense in the broader scheme of the economy?
Because it's not, because when you look at what it means, this is why I'm saying, like, this is a lie that's been purported by Wall Street. When a company fails, it does not fire their employees. It goes through a packaged bankruptcy. Right? If anything, what happens is the people who have the pensions inside those companies, the employees of these companies, end up owning more of the company. The people that get wiped out are the speculators that own the unsecured tranches of debt, or the folks that own the equity. And by the way, those are the rules of the game. That's right, because these are the people that purport to be the most sophisticated investors in the world. They deserve to get wiped out.
Now, those are supposed to be the rules of the game, but of course, they're not the rules of the game. Now, are they? Instead, if you want to look for the people who are the real risk takers, the real makers, to use the obnoxious Ayn Randian language of Paul Ryan and many others, look to the people who, by and large, are treated the absolute worst by our society, paid the least, treated with contempt to the extent their existence is acknowledged at all. When the market determines who is worthwhile and who is not, you end up with a topsy-turvy world in which the lords and ladies of financialization who wreak nothing but destruction and pain are treated like gold, while those who actually keep the society from cratering are treated like dirt. And whether you want to admit it or not, how many of us have bought into that nonsense? How many of you feel deep down like you're worthless, like you've failed and should be filled with shame if you're doing the honest work of the grocer or the driver, the cashier, the sanitation worker, the custodian or the warehouse worker or the CNA? It's another sham, maintained so that we won't question how some have such luxury and ease, the luxury even of pursuing happiness, as I explained yesterday, while the many have instability, constant stress, and peril. The notion that there's anything good or smart or worth preserving about our employer-based healthcare system has, of course, been utterly decimated. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and millions are losing their health insurance. That is a personal disaster for them, but it's a national disaster for all of us as we try to rid this population of the virus. And a result of these revelations, the most powerful tool in the oppression and coercion and obedience toolkit, shame, is also breaking down. Who can feel ashamed about a poor credit score, or missing a payment, or having to admit you need help, or demanding the life of dignity that you actually deserve when we see what an utter sham this entire system actually is? So yes, Congresswoman, we need to dismantle these systems of oppression. It's time to reach beyond the Bernie and FDR plan for an even more far-reaching transformation. Let's give them a real reason for a meltdown. And Sagar, these are all pieces that we've kind of talked about.
Sure.
But as I've been watching, the markets this week and kind of have a moment to assess as the virus again surges out of control, it just really occurred to me how much has been revealed about what an utter shell game the economy really is. All the lies that we've been fed over so many years, how they've kept people in line and how they've been used to maintain the status quo. And I just don't think that holds anymore.
Yeah, I don't know, though, because the truth is that, Joe Biden is up 14 points in the polls. Joe Biden is not offering any of that. He doesn't want a transformative change. So, I agree with you. I think we need to, dramatically change the way that we all live, our society, and new social contracts, so much of that. But a lot of the things that I thought that America was ready for, and I think that they probably still are, just because of coronavirus, have just been put off for a while. And I agree. Look, I don't think it's going to be put off for a long time. I think that a reckoning is going to come after Biden is president. You talked about this is going to be a huge Democratic civil war. I agree that that's going to happen. I think the Republican side, we're going to have exactly the same thing. Post-Trump, if Trump loses, or even if he wins, frankly, there's going to be this whole fight about what does it mean, to make America great again? Should Republicans go back to tax cuts and all this? And I think there's a lot of fools and a lot of money behind that idea. But the slog between those two is going to be immense. But the fight is going to go on much longer than I think a lot of us had thought. And I thought the country was really at a tipping point. And I just think we have to square ourselves with the fact that Joe Biden is very popular. Very much desired by the American public right now.
I don't know if he's desired. He's like the default,
It's still something.
But, it's interesting because I agree and I disagree. Yeah. On the one hand, you're right. Clearly, I'm not buying into Joe Biden's FDR, as much as he may say that, they haven't even bothered to fill in any policy blanks of what that actually means. But in this strange way, I almost feel like electoral politics is sort of beside the point right now. People don't even really care that much about this presidential election. Here we are headed into the summer, and it's barely on people's minds. It's not, people aren't tuning into it the way that it was. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think, for me, I don't see the choice between Trump and Biden as particularly existential. I don't see them as particularly meaningful in terms of dramatically shifting the direction of the country. More what I'm talking about is that understanding in the country of what is going on, they're not going to buy the same lines of BS that we have been fed for years and years and years. And so when does that breaking apart happen? What does it mean? What does it look like? I don't honestly know. But I can tell you that there's no going back to the understanding, to the lies, the mythology that we had around this economy. There's no going back to that era post what people have seen now. I think, look, again, does this happen in a year? Does it happen in 2 years? What does it look like? Does it come through electoral politics? Does it come through some other way? Is it a grassroots movement? Who knows? I have no idea. But I can tell you that that mythology has been broken and it's not going to come back, and that is going to have downstream consequences.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm excited to see it happen, but I've just been waiting for it, I guess.
Next on Rising, Gallup's editor-in-chief, Mohammed Yunus, is going to discuss why their latest polling shows Americans so dissatisfied with the direction of the country. That when Rising returns.